is this whole area of health that is related to water. Very often, all of us read media reports and research reports, which keeps coming to us time and again, that a lot of our diseases, 70% of our diseases are caused by water. But then, if we actually sit back and wonder, which are these diseases? Okay, 70% of these diseases are caused by water, but okay, which are these diseases? Is each of one educated on this? Do we know, what these diseases are? What is the water that we drink? So these are the questions that we started from, and we also, started by thinking, are there ways to easily prevent these diseases? Can we make, leaps in, health by doing this? And it has led us through a journey of many years, and, we have met some of these people over here. So what it says is there are two big water quality issues and contaminant issues that face India today. It talks about arsenic and it talks about fluoride. The fact is that very few of us know that these two contaminants cause two diseases which are called arsenicosis and fluorosis. I think that itself is a big education, for all of us. For example, if you walk around in urban India and you talk to people about fluoride, and the more educated person you talk to about fluoride, the standard response that you would get is, well, fluoride is good for us, right? And then if you start talking about fluorosis, so then, there is first disbelief, and then suspicion. Okay, what is this about? So these are the responses, right? But it's a fact, and as this note says, around more than 60 million people in India are exposed to fluorosis, and it says around 500 million from arsenic. The problem also from all these numbers is that there is not much of evidence, data and information behind these numbers. So some people say it's not 60 million, it's 100 million people. And in India, it's 1 ppm or 1 milligram per liter. So if you take 1 liter of water, that is a standard water bottle that you get, 1 milligram. If you can imagine how small 1 milligram is, 1 gram is 1,000th of a kilogram. 1 milligram is 1,000th of a gram. So we are talking about 1 in a million part. Right? So if you have 1 in a million part of fluoride in that bottle of water, that's harmful to you if you drink it every day. So that's how it is, that's how these contaminants are. And if you take arsenic, it's not 1 in a million, but it's 1 in a billion. And billion is what? Million is 10 lakhs. Billion is 1,000 million, which is 100 crores. If I'm not wrong. So it's 1 part in 100 crores, which causes an arsenic. If you have that, that's harmful for you. So it's that extent. So if you talk about how many people in India are affected, it's a very strange, kind of an estimate. People will give you all kinds of numbers. So, and it's also that even as this note focus, and even as many of us are working on, it's always arsenic and it's always fluoride, which is spoken about. But then if you look at the range of diseases that are affecting people, range of new diseases, and then it might be because of water, it might be because of food. We don't know what causes, some kind of strange cancer might be more in some part of Punjab. Someone says it's because of pesticide. What is the evidence behind this? Some kind of kidney problems are more in coastal areas of Andhra Pradesh. Why? What is causing this? So the first question which I would like to put to the audience over here, to the panel and then to the audience over here, is that how much do we really know about how water and water quality affect us in terms of health? What is the status of this information? What are the range of health problems are we talking about? Is it only about these problems like fluorosis or arsenicosis? So arsenicosis is mainly a skin problem and fluorosis is mainly a bone problem, but then it's much more than all that. Fluorosis is not just a bone problem, it's a problem that affects teeth, it affects kidneys, it affects pregnant women, it affects a whole range of things. Similarly, arsenic finally leads to cancer. So it's a lot of different health problems. So the first question that I would put forward to the panel is that how much do we know about all of this? What is the information behind all of this? And why didn't we hear about all this, say, 30 years back? or say 20 years back, even 10 years back, we were never talking about water quality related health problems. Why are we talking about these problems only today? What is it that is causing these problems? Do we know about it? So do we know about these problems, and do we know about the root causes behind these problems? Starting from Vishwanath here.
Yeah. My name is Vishwanath. I'm a civil engineer and urban planner by qualification. I've been working in the sector for the last 30 years now, the sector of water and sanitation. In the 1947, 50s, and even in the 60s, when India was independent and newly governing itself, the traditional sources of water were surface water sources, rivers and lakes, and in some cases open wells. The major contaminant in these sources were, of course, bacteria. That was the biggest threat that we had, and that had to be combated. Bacteria had to be combated. Of course, chlorination was well known, but other forms of treatment were not well known. So chlorination was our engineering solution to the problem of bacteria in water. But as the 60s moved on and we came to 65, 67, we introduced the bore well in large numbers. And the bore well was actually a miracle solution. It came with a hand pump. It went to depths of about 200 feet at that time. And the bore well water was taken for granted was bacteria free. That was the assumption. And it actually did provide for a lot of places bacteria free water. But what the bore well also did was it unleashed the bore wells in the agricultural sector. And here is where the issue started to become interesting. Now, agricultural water was in competition with drinking water. Quantity and quality were challenging each other. And as depths started going down, then you started to feel other chemical contaminants which were not seen. So the classic case of Bangladesh, where the UNICEF and the British Geological Society pushed people from surface water sources to hand pumps and deeper water sources and did not look for arsenic because it was never seen as a problem. And therefore, the single largest contamination of any population with arsenic water coming out of ignorance and a movement towards deep bore wells. Yeah? So this is one perspective that we have to keep in mind. So our understanding of quality in water, especially chemical contamination, starts from the 80s and actually the 90s. So it's as recent as 25 years old, the threat of fluoride and arsenic at large scale, though Nalgonda fluoride was known much before, but it was never realized that there is a scale to it and the scale is this large. The second is the way the state sees it. And there was a very interesting session in the afternoon where water is a human right, but it's a court-given right in India. That was a point made by a speaker, very nicely made. And you don't get it from the state. You take it from the state by going to court and protesting and taking all the time that you need to get it. The state does not promise you clean drinking water as a fundamental right. The state works only on standards. BIS 10500 is the drinking water standard, and it's not a compact, a legal compact. It's just a standard, it's a guidance value. It's not a legal compact between the state and the citizens to deliver clean water. So if you have problems with arsenic, you have a technical recourse if you go to the state, but you do not have any compensatory recourse from the state. You are not compensated if you get fluorosis or arsenicosis. You cannot legislate and say that my human rights has been violated. So that's another perspective to keep in mind, the rights perspective. The state was in denial for a long time that there was this extent of fluorosis, but quickly the political economy captured that the benefits that could come from identifying fluorosis and arsenic in groundwater, because you could set up equipments to treat it, and therefore that led into a flipping of the model whereby more and more fluoride was being identified, at least in the parts that I worked on, because the political economy could then drive a solution which was the community defluoridation plants. So these are sort of the historical perspective. Then you come to the present, because it's a construct of the legal aspect. What is happening now? You see a proliferation of household level filters. In urban India, those who can afford it, they quickly buy a filter in sheer ignorance. They don't know what they're filtering. They don't know why they're buying it. If it looks blue and makes a sound, all the better. But that's bought, and then you hope that garbage is going in and good water is coming out. You are not given the powers of testing what was the input quality water, neither are you given the powers of testing what the output quality water is. You simply believe this beautiful machine advertised by the leading film stars and sports persons in India, right? So the message is being peddled in certain ways. At the same time, the same drivers of the market products are selling bottled water. And bottled water is seen as pure water, right? That's the imagination that is there. But who checks? And how many of them have BIS quality? And what goes in and what is peddled is a critical issue. This is again affecting the health. So ignorance is bliss. That's the way it goes. And now what happens to fluoride affected area and arsenic affected area is you have social entrepreneurship coming in, the nice blue-eyed cats of the era who are to provide solution, and they're bringing with them RO systems. The state will subsidize the capital, give the land, generally as a model. These venture capitalists and these entrepreneurs will run those plants and provide RO water to the populace at a price. And the price is to be negotiated, 5 rupees for 20 liters, 1 rupee for 10 liters, it goes on. But then again, how many of these RO plants function after 2 years? It's in the discussion we're having, and how much of the populace actually has access to this water? Again, remains a question mark. Then the other challenge before us, and it's nice that the panel is coming along these lines, the requirement for multidisciplinarity to understand good quality water. It's no longer about water, it's about pesticides, it's about sanitation, it's about hydrogeology, it's about geology, and it's about so many other things. For long, we only threw civil engineers as part of the solution. Now we have to throw teams of multidisciplinary people to sort the problem out. It's not easy. It takes time because we need agriculturists to come in to ensure that pesticides and fertilizers are within limits and so on and so forth. So this becomes a big challenge. And finally, I think we have to move towards what is now decided by the World Health Organization as something called the sanitation safety plan, where we do not aim for a holy grail, a final standard which is pure and ideal, but we move gradually to create barriers, one step at a time, to improve the quality so that we eventually reach that holy grail. But in the meantime, we address the most critical issues as quickly as possible for as large a populace as possible. So that's where I think the brief description of where we are and why we are here.
Thanks a lot, Vishwanath. I think it's a broad sweep history of last 60 years. So it's a lot of it. Please. I would like to put forward the question to Somnath. You're saying that, as researchers working on this, as people who are consciously working on this issue, is there information on all of this? If someone wants to know, if it's there, is it accessible? Is there sufficient information on all this to say that, okay, this water in this village over here, it's not good to drink? Do we have sufficient information?
With your permission, I will expand the scope of quality to also mean bacteriological contamination. So I'll take a minute to sort of help you understand that. And this is the very important question that Sundar has sort of raised. At one level, we can look at the deep science, and if you know the story of the muzzle of climate change, or more recently in the early 80s, that as soon as ozone levels were exceeded certain the recording filtered it and registered it as not valid. So there is, I think, I'll put on board this uncertainty and uneasiness of the science of it, that something so innocuous like water could be so dangerous that if you drank it over a period of years, and fluorosis is a very good example, you could have severe debilitation, your bones, your teeth, and so on and so forth. And then somebody comes and tells you, actually you need a little bit, because if you don't have a little bit, then there's a problem. So here's a thing of the puzzle of minerals having to be in certain kind of limits. And there is a hope in hell that ordinary people should try and understand and unravel that. So I think there are scientists, there is the government, and they have the custodianship of ensuring that good quality water, which is not harmful to health, should be accessible to everyone, and the poor in particular for obvious reasons, because they can't buy what rich people buy in terms of RO filters and so on and so forth. So there is that uncertainty. And as we go along, scientists will discover more and more complicated kinds of diseases and disease pathways, in which you'll find that water is at least a carrier, if not the culprit, right? Be that as it may, I think let's step back and say, do we, however, have basic information which can empower our governments, our citizenry? And I think there is a lot of information which people who are experts in the water sector hold back because that's their business. So there have been a number of studies which have been done, not just on arsenic, fluoride contamination, but also on microbiological contamination, the story of eating shit. And it's been quantified, and people very well know three things. That many of the diseases which are called waterborne diseases are waterborne but attributable to either a chemical or a biological origin, right? So if you would put shit in water, that will contaminate the water, and mistakenly, or even in international literature including WHO, would call it waterborne disease. But actually it's a sanitation attributable disease. So that there is that distinction. Similarly, there are some chemicals from, especially the agriculture, fertilizer use and overuse, which gets into your groundwater, which gets into your surface water, is erroneously called water is the culprit. But the fact of the matter is it's come from a certain kind of runoff, which has contaminated your water. And whoever was responsible for ensuring that that doesn't happen, or that gets treated and cured before it reaches my and your glass, didn't do their job well. And I think there is a disconnect here, because the institutional mechanisms to worry about quality is at best input oriented, which is to say, do I have a laboratory? Do I, before releasing my water, so if I'm in an urban area, a water utility, a large one like Bangalore Water Board or DJB, is worried about the water that they release should be of kosher quality. What you get at the end of your pipe is not really their problem, right? So you might get on the way water which is mixed up with a variety of interesting chemical and biological ingredients, and then you have to put it through the RO system. So in a sense, you're seeing a complete breakdown of what the social custodianship of water was to a privatization of that cost and benefit to your homes. So as citizens, as households, you are bound to therefore worry about water and buy the best equipment, which may not be required, unfortunately, because those minerals and contaminants may not be there. But I think people err on the side of caution and waste a huge amount of money. But the false side is that governments, public institutions, scientific institutions who have this information and should make it available to the public in very simple terms have not done so. So it's very counterintuitive, but if you know that if you go and bathe in a river in India, don't bathe in the Yamuna, I will not recommend that. Don't even touch the water. Then there are certain water quality standards which say it should or should not have certain levels of contaminants, biological, chemical, and so on. Which is to say that, look, even if you didn't drink the water, if you touched it or bathed in it, you will have a problem. You will have a skin rash overtly, and going forward, something else. This is, water has been too sort of closeted in the hands of civil engineers and now utility engineers. And whenever somebody actually picked up a glass of water and said, does this water have shit? And I remember Kamalkar doing that in innumerable villages in Bangladesh to begin with, and later on in India. People were shocked. They said, really, do we have the right to ask whether this is of kosher quality? And do we have the legitimacy to do so? So I think the big message is, yes, water is too important to leave it to engineers or even scientists. And I think that is a space that we as civil society should put pressure on, saying, fine, you don't have the best science. Fine, you screwed up big time in Bangladesh and now in West Bengal and in Andhra Pradesh. But at least put out what you know and say what you do not know and what the limits are. And I think our friends in the media should pick this up. And there are so many stories we can tell you which is hidden in graphs and numbers and so on and so forth. So just to quickly take 30 seconds and conclude what I'm provoking you to think about, is that there was a set of studies which we did which looked at how does poor sanitation and poor water hurt the economy. And you can say it's a specious calculation, it is in a way, but it was to shake people up, and it did. So in 2011, we did a study which looked at and found that because of poor water quality, you hurt people by obvious health impacts. So first, children die. Second, you get people to be unwell. Third, you have to invest in stuff like water treatment at household level and so on. Fourth, your sources of water keep going further and further. So you invest in more pipes and plumbing and so on and so forth, erroneously rather than fixing the problem. And five, and that's the very important one, the kind of debilitating long-term consequences it has on children, including like the rice colleagues have shown, stunting and so on and so forth, is really a worrisome thing. That's not something that we have rocket science on, but we know that that happens. That really simply means that if our children repeatedly fall ill to sanitation, water-related diseases very frequently, then their growth, intellectual and physical development later on is severely impaired. Now, this is not rocket science, this is pretty well known, but somebody has to put this out there in a powerful enough form. So the study put the number at 6.4% equivalent of India's annual GDP was being lost to inadequate sanitation, which had all these series of sort of components.
Thanks a lot, Somnath.